Hi everyone, welcome back to the Chapter 21 Study Guides. In this video, we'll prepare Success Systems Statement of Cash Flows for the year ended December 31st, 20X2 using the Indirect Method. This is a more advanced accounting class, and the Indirect Method was emphasized in the two accounting classes that are prerequisites to this class. The Indirect Method was emphasized in both Accounting 301 and Accounting 103. Accordingly, I'm going to move through this demonstration rather quickly because it should be pretty much a review for you. In the real world, a company chooses which method to use when preparing their statement of cash flows. They do not prepare the statement of cash flows in the same year using both methods. However, we already prepared the statement of cash flows using the direct method in the prior two study guide videos, so I'm going to take a shortcut. I know the investing and financing activities sections of a statement of cash flows are the same under both the direct and indirect methods. So the shortcut I'm going to take is to simply make a copy of the direct method financial statement. Then all I will have to do is modify the operating activities section to present it using the indirect method. By the way, I'll be using illustration 21-9B in your textbook as a format for this section. You might want to flag that page. Here's the statement of cash flows using the direct method that we completed together in the prior study guide videos. I'll make a copy of this worksheet and simply choose the tab title. Here's the copy of the statement of cash flows using the direct method that I just made. I changed this tab title to Statement of Cash Flows Indirect. Another thing I know is that the net cash flows from operating activities should be the same using both the direct and indirect methods. So before I delete the direct method operating section, I'm going to make a note of this negative $515 of cash flows from operating activities. So I just put the $515 negative amount here. That's my goal. When I complete the cash flows from operating activities section using the indirect method, I know I should end up right here, negative $515. And I'll know that if I don't end up with this calculated number, then I made a mistake somewhere. When I finish my statement of cash flows on the indirect method, I'll delete this number because it does not belong on the formal financial statement. Okay, now I'm ready to delete the cash inflows and outflows that we used under the direct method. But before we get started in preparing the cash flows from operating activities under the indirect method, I think we should take a bonus break. I'll give 5 bonus points to the first 20 students who send me a picture of a cute kitten before the due date of the final exam. Okay, let's get started. The operating section of a statement of cash flows prepared using the indirect method always begins with the company's net income or net loss. Looking at the income statement for Success Systems, we see that they had net income of $18,686 for the year ended December 31st, 20X2. We'll use this number on our statement of cash flows, but we will need to adjust the net income number, for any amounts of income or expense that did not arise from a cash transaction. In this income statement, there is only one non-cash item. Depreciation expense in the amount of $1,650 is a non-cash expense. Cash was not used for that expense and will never be used for that expense. I think you know that all of these expenses decreased revenue in arriving at net income. So if we're going to adjust net income that was prepared on the accrual basis to essentially the cash basis, what we need to do is add back non-cash expenses. So on our statement of cash flows, we're going to start out with net income, and then we're going to add back non-cash expenses, in this case depreciation expense. Let's see how that looks on our statement of cash flows using the indirect approach. Net income from the income statement, $18,686. Then the line that says adjustments for non-cash effects. Depreciation expense, $1,650 will increase net income. Next, we need to adjust the accrual basis net income for changes in current assets and current liabilities. Go ahead and insert this header as your next line in your statement of cash flows. There are two important rules to follow in this part of the operating activities section of a statement of cash flows prepared using the indirect method. These are very important rules. You should write them down. Rule number 1. Increases and decreases in current assets will have the opposite effect on net income. Write that down. Increases and decreases in current assets will have the opposite effect on net income. What that means is, if the balance in a current asset increased, you must subtract the amount of that increase from net income. And if the balance in a current asset decreased, you must add the amount of that decrease to net income. Rule number 2. Increases and decreases in current liabilities will have a direct effect on net income. Write that down. Increases and decreases in current liabilities will have a direct effect on net income. What that means is, if the balance in a current liability increased, you must add the amount of that increase to net income. If the balance in a current liability decreased, you must subtract the amount of that decrease from net income. After listening to the following directions, I would like you to pause your video and complete the rest of the operating activities section of the statement of cash flows. The comparative balance sheets for Success Systems as of December 31st, 20X1 and 20X2 have been given to you. And I already calculated the change in the account balances for you. The change in cash and cash equivalents is not shown in the operating section of the statement of cash flows. So you should start the section of cash flows that show the changes in current assets and current liabilities with the $17,052 increase in accounts receivable. Then work through all of your current assets and your current liabilities to show the change on your statement of cash flows. Be sure to include all of your current and only current assets and your current liabilities. However, you should not include any current asset or current liability whose balance did not change during the year. Remember that after finishing the cash flows from operating activities section of this cash flows or statement of cash flows, you should show and calculate a $515 negative cash flows from operating activities. If you calculate a different number, then you made an error somewhere that needs to be fixed. When you are satisfied with your operating activities section, please start the video again to check your work. This is the completed statement of cash flows for Success Systems for the year ended December 31st, 20X2, using the indirect approach. Notice that my net cash flows from operating activities under the indirect method is the same as it was for the direct method. I'm going to go ahead and delete this little note out here because it doesn't belong on the statement of cash flows. Remember rule number 1? Changes in current assets have the opposite effect on net income. Because we had an increase in accounts receivable, merchandise inventory, and supplies, those increases have an opposite effect on net income and will decrease net income. Rule number 2, prepaid insurance actually decreased. It had the opposite effect of being added back to net income. Then rule number 2, changes in current liabilities will have a direct effect on net income. Decrease in accounts payable and decrease in unearned service revenue then also decreased net income, while the increase in wages payable increased net income. And when you add and subtract all the numbers in this column, net cash flows from operating activities were indeed a negative $515. More cash was used in operating activities than was received in operating activities. Well, that's all for this video.